When you cease being constantly available, the world begins to take notice in the silence you leave behind. You no longer chase validation from people who barely understand your worth. This withdrawal is not loneliness, it is power redefined. Carl Jung believed that true transformation happens when a person meets their shadow, not when they keep performing for the approval of others. People start to wander, not out of entitlement, but from the haunting realization that access to you was a privilege, not a right. In that space of your silence, you become unforgettable. By stepping back, you stop feeding the illusion that your presence is cheap or guaranteed. Instead, you begin the sacred process of reclaiming yourself. It's understanding that not everyone deserves a front row seat to your revel. When you stop being available, you create mystery, and with mystery comes respect. Your light shines brighter, not because more people see it, but because you no longer dim it for comfort. Your availability no longer defines your worth. By withdrawing, you invite others to reflect on what they took for granted. Your absence becomes louder than your presence ever was. But when you begin honoring your time and energy, people are forced to meet you at your value or not at all. Jung taught that those who explore their unconscious become whole, and those who are always available never get the chance to hear what their soul is trying to say. When you stop answering every call, responding to every demand, you remind the world that your soul is not a service. When something becomes rare, it becomes valuable. When you become selective with your time, energy, and attention, you rise in quiet significance. We live in a world addicted to immediate responses, instant gratification, and but psychological peace is not born in chaos, it blooms in intentional withdrawal. Their realization will come not through confrontation, but through contrast. When you no longer tolerate being an emotional vending machine, people will either adjust or exit. Either way, you win. Jung said, "You are what you do, not what you say you'll do." Being constantly present for others while abandoning yourself leads to spiritual depletion. The mind, like the body, needs space to breathe. And in your absence, you give your soul permission to recalibrate. Your constant availability masks your depth, but your chosen absence uncovers your essence. By removing yourself from draining environments, you become aligned with opportunities that nourish you. When you vanish from superficial circles, you begin to attract connections that are rooted, not rented. It's the beginning of a journey back to your truest self, unfiltered and unafraid. When you no longer cling to what doesn't choose you, you make space for what's truly meant for you. The most powerful transformations are not loud. They are quiet, deliberate, and deeply personal. Jung would call this individuation the process of becoming whole by integrating what was once rejected. Growth offends those who refuse to evolve, but you are not here to remain digestible for those who feed on your energy. Your healing begins the moment you stop explaining yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you. Every no you say to others becomes a yes to yourself, and that is the most radical form of self-love there is. When you detach from external noise, your inner voice becomes clearer. That clarity is terrifying to those who once controlled you through guilt. Making yourself less accessible is not arrogance, it is alignment. It is choosing peace over people-pleasing, solitude over shallow connections, and authenticity over approval. By disappearing from the distractions, you reappear to yourself. The irony is that when you stop showing up for everyone, you finally show up for yourself. Respect is earned not by presence, but by absence. It is in your absence that people reevaluate your importance, your kindness, your presence. In the psychological realm, the law of scarcity plays a powerful role. You were never meant to be everything for everyone. The path to inner peace requires boundaries carved in stone, not sand. There is wisdom in silence, healing in solitude, and strength in stillness. Being unavailable is a spiritual filter. It reveals who genuinely values you and who was merely using your presence as a crutch. People may call you distant, cold, or changed, but that's only because they're no longer benefiting from your availability. Stepping back doesn't mean disappearing from life. It means showing up with purpose. Jung believed that the journey inward is a descent into the self, a place where masks are removed and truths are unearthed. There is sacredness in being missed. You don't need to announce your withdrawal. Your absence will echo in the lives of those who once overlooked your presence. You teach people how to treat you by what you tolerate. Becoming less available is not about playing games, it's about reclaiming balance. You become magnetic, not by being everywhere, but by being in the right place with the right energy. You stop chasing and start attracting. The universe responds not to desperation, but to dignity. Carl Jung said, "Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes." Your unavailability is not sleep, it's awakening. You begin to realize that not everyone deserves access to your mind, your energy, or your presence. With every boundary you draw, you reclaim the fragments of yourself scattered by people who only wanted what they could take. This self-reclamation is not arrogance, it's emotional maturity disguised as silence. Silence becomes your new strength, not a punishment, but a filter. It allows you to separate those who are truly meant for you from those who simply benefited from your constant availability. In that quiet space, your power multiplies. When you stop explaining yourself, you become dangerously free. You learn that not every wound needs to be shown to be healed. Some healing happens in private, in the places where you stopped waiting for closure and gave yourself peace instead. You are not meant to be available for those who abandon themselves and expect you to carry their weight. Your role was never to rescue people from their own shadows. That's a journey they must face alone. Carl Jung would say, "No tree can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell." Availability is often mistaken for love, but it can also be a fear of abandonment in disguise. You overextend, you overexplain, you overstay, all because you're afraid of being misunderstood. But the truth is, when you stop fearing disconnection, you start attracting connection that's real. When you stop being available, the manipulators notice first. They sense the shift, not because they miss you, but because they miss the control. But your new boundary doesn't need a speech. Your absence delivers the message louder than words ever could. Withdraw your energy, and you'll see what was real. You'll see who checks in without a reason, who respects your space, and who disappears the moment your usefulness ends. Disengagement is not cruelty, it's clarity. Your availability was a bridge others crossed carelessly. Now that you've lifted it, you see who swam across just to reach you. That effort is love, not convenience. And love that arrives through effort holds more truth than love that arrives through habit. People call you distant now, not realizing that your distance was born from their disregard. You didn't change overnight. You evolved silently through 1,000 disappointments. And with every letdown, you chose yourself louder. Jung believed in individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are. It requires breaking away from the unconscious patterns of people-pleasing, guilt-driven loyalty, and self-abandonment. Individuation is what happens when you stop being emotionally available for dysfunction. You used to pick up calls on the first ring, answer texts instantly, and say yes just to keep peace. Now, your peace comes from turning off your phone, unplugging from noise, and remembering that urgency is rarely sacred. What's sacred waits for presence. When you stop being available, you confront your fear of being replaced. But then something beautiful happens. You realize no one can replace someone who's whole. And being whole isn't about perfection. It's about knowing your worth without needing reminders. You start choosing depth over frequency, truth over tolerance, and solitude over shallow attention. The world doesn't applaud this shift, because you're no longer a tool for their validation. But your soul breathes better in this newfound atmosphere. There's a strange discomfort when you stop chasing. But that discomfort is detox. You're purging the addiction to chaos, overexertion, and conditional love. You begin to feel clean inside, lighter, more aligned with yourself. This withdrawal isn't revenge, it's recovery. Recovery from years of overfunctioning for those who aren't, from always showing up for people who only showed up for themselves. You're not bitter, you're awake. Even your silence holds boundaries now. Where you once overshared to feel seen, you now observe quietly. That mystery confuses those who thrived on your emotional transparency. But it's not your job to explain your The moment you stop being emotionally available to everyone, you make room for the one who truly sees you. Not the performance, not the version you made small, but the whole you wounds and all. That space isn't empty, it's sacred. People who are used to your constant empathy will call you cold when you stop overextending. But empathy without boundaries becomes self-destruction. Now you love with discernment. Now you offer without depletion. You are not missing out by being unavailable to chaos. You are aligning with the parts of you that have waited patiently to be heard. And in that silence, your inner voice, the one society told you to suppress, finally speaks. You stop rescuing people from lessons they're meant to learn. Because you've learned your own the hard way. You understand now saving others from their discomfort often means delaying their growth. That's not compassion. That's control. Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Your availability was once unconscious, a response to wounds you didn't even know existed. Now, it's a choice, and that makes it powerful. They'll say you're distant. They'll say you changed. But what really happened is, you stopped abandoning yourself, and the self that emerged from that reclamation is not here to entertain dysfunction anymore. Now your time is sacred, your space is intentional, your energy is protected. You no longer allow others to dictate your rhythm, because your rhythm is your power, and your power is finally yours. Not everything deserves a response. Not every invitation deserves your presence. When you stop being available for everything, you finally become available for the right things, the things that expand you instead of draining you. You are not unkind for choosing peace. You are not selfish for choosing solitude. You are simply honoring the truth that not everyone is meant to walk with you. Some were just passing through to remind you what you no longer need. The ones who truly value you won't require constant access to prove their love. They'll understand your silence. They'll respect your boundaries. Because love that is real makes space, not demands. When you stop being emotionally available to manipulation, you confuse people who relied on your guilt. But your clarity is not up for debate. You are no longer explaining decisions that protect your peace. Carl Jung taught that the shadow, the repressed part of ourselves, often holds the key to our wholeness. You've faced your shadow, and now you walk lighter because you no longer fear the parts of yourself that once they used to rely on your yes, not because they respected it, but because they expected it. When you stopped saying yes by default, their tone shifted. It wasn't disappointment they felt. It was a shock of losing access to convenience. Every time you chose stillness over reaction, you stepped deeper into power. Not loud, not aggressive, just grounded. And from that groundedness, you started hearing your own needs louder than the noise of others' expectations. You learned that being available to everyone means being absent from yourself. And for far too long, you traded your soul for approval, your peace for permission, your truth for acceptance. That's no longer your currency. Now you move differently, slowly, with intention. You're no longer rushed to explain, to fix, to soothe, because you've realized your presence is not a bomb for everyone's chaos. It's a gift, and it must be earned. You stop fearing the label selfish, because you understand that selfishness is survival in a world that profits from your exhaustion. They don't call you selfish when you give until you're empty, only when you begin to preserve. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." You cannot become that person while drowning in the demands of others. You need space, silence, disconnection from what never saw you clearly. When you stop being available to drama, you feel peace that almost scares you. You're so used to living in emotional turbulence that calm feels unnatural. But that calm is your true nature. The storm was never yours. People begin to project when you pull away. They say you're arrogant, cold, distant, not realizing that your detachment is not a wall, but a mirror. And what they see in it isn't you. It's what they never addressed in themselves. Availability became a cage dressed as kindness. You held space for everyone but yourself. You stayed up late solving problems that weren't yours to solve, but now you sleep, you rest, you let others carry their own weight. There is a version of you that existed only in response to others. That version is dissolving. In its place grows someone more centered. Someone who doesn't chase, doesn't beg, doesn't shrink. Someone whose presence is enough. You used to stretch yourself thin to make others comfortable. Now you realize that your edges are not meant to be softened for the sake of fitting in. Your sharpness is sacred. Your boundaries are sacred. And when you stop being emotionally available to guilt, it loses its grip. The guilt they planted in you for choosing yourself begins to wither. What blooms in its place is freedom. Deep, unapologetic freedom. They will say you changed, but they will never admit how their treatment of you made that change necessary. They will grieve the version of you that tolerated everything led them. That version is gone for good. You are not cold. You are clear. You are not mean. You are direct. You are not detached. You are healed. Healing changes your energy. It makes you less accessible to things that once drained you and called it love. You used to fear losing people. Now you fear losing yourself again in the pursuit of people. That shift is sacred. It means you've begun to prioritize the one relationship that shapes all others. The one you have with yourself. When you become unavailable to chaos, chaos has nowhere to land. And you realize it was never just around you, it was inside you too, fed by unhealed wounds and unmet needs. Now that you've tended to them, peace has room to grow. You notice who reaches out when they can no longer take, only give. And in that noticing, you no longer beg for loyalty. You allow it to show itself through consistency, not crisis. Love doesn't need a stage. It shows up quietly. You stop over-explaining because you know your truth doesn't require validation. You stop justifying because your boundaries don't need permission. The less you explain, the more you reclaim. You begin to value solitude, not as isolation, but as intimacy with yourself. The world called it loneliness, but in truth, it's the sacred silence where your soul finally speaks without interruption. Carl Jung believed we all carry shadows, and that avoiding them only gives them more power. When you became unavailable to others, you had to confront your own. That confrontation is where your real growth began. You didn't just stop being available to people. You stopped being available to patterns, of ignoring red flags, of mistaking attention for affection. You stopped dancing with ghosts and started building with truth. You start asking yourself, does this nourish me or deplete me? And if the answer is depletion, you walk away. No apology, no drama. Because your peace is no longer negotiable. You realize you were never too much. You were just too available to people who were too little. And now that you've made room for realness, you'll never again settle for smallness in the name of connection. People think distance is punishment. It's not. It's preservation. It's respect for yourself and your energy. You're not withdrawing to hurt them. You're detaching to heal you. You no longer argue to be understood. You understand yourself deeply enough that misunderstanding doesn't shake your foundation. You're anchored now, not in other people's perceptions, but in your own truth. You learn that no is a complete sentence, that silence is a boundary, that detachment is a form of self, and you begin to move through life not trying to be everything, just trying to be aligned. Jung said, who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens. You've been awakened, and now that you see clearly, you can't unsee. You can't unfeel the liberation of finally choosing you. You begin to see how much energy you gave to relationships that were one-sided, conditional, performative. And now that your love is rooted in self-awareness, it's no longer available for performance. It seeks depth, or nothing at all. You no longer react from wounds. You respond from wisdom. You no longer chase, you attract through alignment. You no longer fear solitude. You honor it as sacred ground. You stop being emotionally available to potential and start valuing patterns. No more falling for apologies without changed behavior. No more investing in words that don't match actions. Your standards have become sacred. Now, people must meet you where you are, not where they imagine you to be. The days of shrinking to be liked, bending to be needed, or breaking to be loved are over. You show up whole, or not at all. You no longer engage. People will only value your presence when they feel the weight of your absence. The moment you pull back, you disrupt their patterns. And it's in that disruption where realization is born. We're conditioned to overextend, to overgive, to be endlessly accessible. But Jung taught that anything unconscious controls us, and being too available is often an unconscious cry for validation. Every time you say yes to avoid discomfort, you abandon your authentic self. You become a version of you that's easier to consume. But healing starts when you stop shaping yourself around other people's needs. Jung emphasized the power of withdrawal not as escape, but as transformation. By retreating, you allow the psyche to speak. You discover who you are without noise. When you always show up, people forget to appreciate your presence. But distance forces reflection. In your absence, they confront their own patterns of dependency. Boundaries aren't walls. They're mirrors. They show people how far they've come and how far they've yet to go. And they reveal your own value, independent of others. Stopping your availability isn't selfish. It's telling the world, my energy is not a free commodity. It's a sacred act of self. The inner child in you may panic when you say no. It remembers love as something you earn. But the adult in you knows real love never demands your exhaustion. Availability without discernment becomes, you stretch yourself so thin you lose your own reflection. And slowly, invisibility becomes your new identity. People will say you've changed when you stop bending for them. That's not betrayal, it's growth. Always feels like rebellion to those who benefited from your silence. Your constant yes creates a cage disguised as connection. But true connection can handle your no. It doesn't need you to bleed to feel bonded. Jung's work reminds us that our unconscious wounds play out in our relationships. Always being available may be rooted in abandonment, fears. But you're not here to heal others by harming yourself. Withdraw to reclaim your power. Observe who checks in when you stop reaching out. The silence will reveal who was truly present. When you disappear for a while, two things happen. You heal, and you see who misses your light. Both are clarifying, both are necessary. Silence is not absence. It's space. Space to breathe, to listen, to return stronger and more whole. You weren't born to be a background character in everyone else's story. Reducing yourself for others is not human. Every soul craves to be seen, but not at the cost of self. It's better to be disliked for who you are than loved for who you're not. Start saying no without apology. Walk away without closure. Protect your peace like it's sacred, because it is. People mirror how we treat ourselves. When you respect your time, others will follow. When you become rare, you become valuable. Being unavailable allows your energy to recalibrate. It frees you from the addiction to approval. It returns you to yourself. Stop texting first. Stop fixing everything. Stop Watch how the universe rearranges when you stop trying so hard. You don't owe anyone constant access. You're not a product. You're a person, and your soul deserves space to breathe. Every boundary is a line drawn in the sand of self. The stronger the boundary, the clearer the message. When you pause, you gain perspective. You realize some relationships were based on your availability, not your essence. And that truth stings before it sets you free. Stop rescuing people who don't want to be saved. Stop explaining yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you. Let your silence speak louder than your efforts. You teach people how to treat you. If you're always available, always answering, always giving, why would they ever change? There's beauty in becoming a little mysterious again, in not sharing everything, in letting people wonder where your fire went. Carl Jung believed the unconscious drives most of our behavior. Becoming unavailable forces your unconscious needs into light. You begin to ask, why do I feel guilty for resting? Your guilt isn't real, it's programming. Old wounds whisper that love is earned through exhaustion. But you can rewrite that story. When you stop being always available, you meet yourself in a deeper way. You uncover the parts that existed before people's expectations shaped you. It's okay to be missed. It's okay to take space. You don't need to explain your solitude to anyone not willing to understand it. Availability is often mistaken for love, but real love respects your distance. Real love doesn't fear your silence, it honors it. Withdraw from the noise. Reconnect with the stillness. That's where you find your truth. People who love your light will still seek it when it dims, and those who only loved the light it gave them will vanish. Let them. Rejection doesn't always mean failure, it can mean freedom. Freedom from being who you're not. Freedom from the cage of the best version of you won't emerge while you're constantly pouring into others. That version needs time, space, and solitude to rise. Let the phone ring. Let the message sit. Let people wonder. You are not abandoning anyone, you are choosing yourself. Carl Jung once said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Your availability can be one of those unconscious patterns. What if your chronic need to be there for everyone is really a distraction from being there for yourself? What if your healing is waiting in the space you're afraid to create? The people who matter won't mind your distance, and the ones who mind probably benefited from your lack of boundaries. Healing isn't about becoming harder, it's about becoming more aligned. And sometimes alignment means letting go of the need to please. Availability can be addictive. It feeds our need for significance. But real significance doesn't require constant proving. Pulling back can be painful at first. You'll feel selfish, cold, even lost. But stay in that discomfort, it's where your transformation lives. For a day, a week, a season, watch how your energy shifts. Watch how your clarity returns. In the stillness, you'll remember who you were before you were needed. And that version of you, that's the one who carries your truest power.